Hello and welcome back. All right, so in this section, we're going to go over some more retouching tools. There are a total of 5 tools, all of which are used for retouching your images. They're placed separately from the stamp tools because they apply the retouching of your image differently. And we're going to go over those differences in this lesson. So here we have our healing tools, and we have our spot healing brush tool, the healing brush tool, patch tool, content aware move tool, and our red eye removal tool. So real quick, here's a overview of the main differences between the healing brush tool and the stamp tool. Instead of sampling an exact copy, the healing tools will sample the texture, the colors, and the pixels of an area of the image versus making an exact copy. Then the healing tools will blend that information that it sampled from over the area being retouched, and it will blend it in much more naturally versus the stamp tool. Now, depending on which healing tool you select will determine if you need to physically sample an area of the photo like we do with our stamp tool, or depending on the tool, Photoshop will do it for you automatically. Now, the healing tools almost sound perfect, and in a way, the healing tools are much more advanced and do provide better results most of the time. Now, there's going to be times when the stamp tool will do a much better job, and I'm going to show you an example of that in this lesson. So we're going to go over both the spot healing brush tool and the healing brush tool in this lesson, and then we're going to go over the other 3 healing tools in the next 3 lessons. Now, all 5 tools, depending on which one you selected last, can be accessed with the same keyboard shortcut, which is the letter J, or if you need to choose a different keyboard shortcut, just come over here to the toolbar to select the different tool that you need. Now, just like any other tool that you select, you will find some options up here for that particular tool, and each one of the different tools in here will have different options. So let's go ahead and start with the healing brush tool first, and then we'll go ahead and use it on this image. So we do have some common options up here that we've learned about from previous lessons. So we're not going to go into detail about all of the options. We do have our blending modes here. We do have options to either source a sampled area, or we can sample from a pattern. So right here, this is just a little bit different than the stamp tool where you couldn't choose one or the other for that particular tool. Unless you chose the pattern stamp tool, then you could select a pattern. Just a regular stamp tool just samples or copies exactly. So the healing tool gives you an option. Most of the time, because we are retouching images, we're just going to use sampled. We also have aligned, which will determine if the sampled area stays where we selected it the first time, or it may move with the brush depending on where we're working on our image. Typically, I leave that turned on because I want the sampled area to stay with the brush. And I do that because most of the time that sampled area is going to be aligned with an area that I want to retouch with anyways. Next, we have current and below, which is our sampled layers. So if we're working non-destructively, we're going to use current and below, or we can use all layers or current layer if you're not working non-destructively. Now, if you do use adjustment layers as you're working non-destructively, which are these layers here, then you can turn them off so that nothing is being sampled from those layers with this icon right here. And then we have our tablet option, and then diffusion. And then our diffusion slider will control how quickly the pasted region adapts to the surrounding area. So as you're retouching, you can adjust it to blend in that area much quicker or slower, depending on what you're retouching. As a general guideline, you want lower slider values for images with a lot of grain or fine details, whereas higher values are good for smooth images. So typically, I'll just leave it at the default of around 5, and I just find that works best for portraits. All right, I'm going to go ahead and zoom in so we can go ahead and start removing some blemishes on this portrait. So the first thing we need to do is we need to tell Photoshop where we want to sample information from. So I'm going to typically sample areas that are similar to the areas that I want to retouch. So basically right around this area for the eye, and because I have aligned turned on, then it's going to keep it in that general area. So I'm just going to click right here, and then I'm going to click on top of one of the blemishes, and it's automatically going to remove that blemish. Now the only thing is I want to work non-destructive, so I'm going to go ahead and undo that with Command or Control and the letter Z. I'm going to go ahead and create a new layer, and I'm going to go ahead and redo that. And then I just need to go over each one of the different areas to remove that blemish. And if I need to, I can always hold down my Alt or Option key to select a new sampled area to retouch from. So the main difference between this and the stamp tool is the way that the information is being taken from the area being sampled, and the stamp tool is copying those pixels exactly, whereas the healing brush tools will take that sampled area and take the texture and the colors of the pixels and blend it in with the area that's being retouched, and it tends to give you much more natural, realistic results, and in general the results are much better. But I'm going to show you an example of when it's not going to work. So let's go ahead and take a look at our next tool, which is our Spot Healing Brush tool. And it does have some different options up here, so we're going to go over those. But first, I just want to mention that with this particular tool, you do not have to tell Photoshop where to sample the information from. If you hold down your Alt or Option key, the icon does change, but when you go to select an area to sample from, you're going to get a little warning that says that the Healing Brush tool will automatically sample pixels to correct a spot with one step. So if you do want to set the area and you don't want Photoshop to decide for you, then you need to reselect the Healing Brush tool. All right, let's go ahead and do a brief overview of these different options up here so we have a better understanding of what these options are, and then we'll go ahead and do some more retouching. So the Spot Healing tool has 3 basic modes that you can work with. And they each will give you a different way that the area that you're retouching gets filled in with information. With Content Aware, this option will allow Photoshop to intelligently select the best option to fill in the area that you're trying to retouch. The Create Texture mode works slightly different than Content Aware. With this one, it's going to read the information that it's trying to copy from to blend in with, and it's going to generate a texture pattern from that sampled area. So it's going to help blend it in a little bit better than maybe the Content Aware option. And then we have Proximity Match. This particular mode is going to analyze the pixels and the information around the area that you're painting to identify the best area to sample from for the information to fill in. Okay, so real quick, Content Aware, Photoshop is going to do its magic and fix the area that you want to retouch. Create Texture is going to take more texture information to try and blend it in a little bit better. Proximity Match is going to take an area close to the area that you're trying to retouch and try and blend it in. So all 3 options give you a different way to try and retouch what you're retouching, and they're all going to give you different results. So it's probably best to show you how each one of these will give you different results. So let's go ahead and make sure we have Content Aware selected, and we'll start with that tool. Let's first go ahead and create a new layer so we can work on a new layer to keep everything separated from each other. That way you can turn them on and off later to compare the results. Let's go ahead and rename these layers as well so that we can keep them separated. So this first one, we used our Healing Brush tool. So I'm going to name it Healing Brush tool. And then this next layer, I'm going to name it Content Aware. And then we'll create new layers for each one of the different options. Okay, I'm going to use my spacebar key to access my hand icon so I can navigate to another part of the image. And I'm just going to paint over this little blemish right here. We don't need to hold down our Alt or Option key because with this tool, Photoshop is going to automatically sample an area from the image. It's going to use its advanced technology to figure out an area to sample from automatically. And you're going to find out that 99% of the time, it picks out an area that works. So as you can see, I'm just painting over these blemishes and Photoshop is getting it right. Now if it doesn't, I can always click back over that area again so that it samples a different area to try and blend it in. And that's how you use the Spot Healing Brush tool with Content Aware. All right, I'm going to create a new layer and name it Create Texture. Let's go ahead and select the Create Texture option, and let's go ahead and paint over some blemishes. So as you can see, the results are pretty much the same. It is taking in different information and applying texture, and actually you can see that right there. I'm guessing that's from the eyebrows, the way that it looks right there. So it is creating a texture in the area, but you may not want a texture on skin that's going to be sampled from the hair. So if we go back to Content Aware, we can then go ahead and paint that over to fix it. So you may have to flip back and forth between the three options to find the best results if you're not getting the results that you want. I tend to find that Content Aware works the majority of the time, and that's the one that I'm always working with. All right, let's go ahead and find some other blemishes here, and let's create a new layer for Proximity Match. Go ahead and select Proximity Match, and let's go ahead and remove some blemishes. Again, it's removing the blemishes just like it did the other two options. So again, it's just a matter of choosing which one works best for you, and if it's not working, just pick out a different option. Now, if we get closer to the edge of the skin right here, we can see that it's pretty dark right here, and then we have some light areas here and light areas here. So with Proximity Match, what it's going to do is it's going to take the information around this blemish or where we're applying that brush, and it's going to take that information into consideration to blend it in. Problem is, when you get into areas like this, it's not going to work as well versus maybe the other two options. So I'm going to undo that with Command or Control and the letter Z. Let's go ahead and try Create Texture. It blended it in better, but it's much lighter versus the surrounding area, so that tool does not work either. Let's try Content Aware and see what that does. That worked a lot better. There's a few spots here that I might want to keep going over until it blends in a little bit better, but that was probably the best option of the three for that area. Now let's take a look at an area where maybe none of them will work. So let's say our client was self-conscious about this patch of hair right here, and he wants this removed. I'm going to go ahead and increase my brush size just a little bit to cover a little bit more of the area. Content Aware is still selected, and I'm going to go ahead and paint over this area. Now, as you can see, it didn't really remove it as well as some of the other blemishes that we worked on. So let's try Create Texture. Again, we have a nice dark patch right here, so that didn't work. Let's try Proximity Match. And that didn't work either. So what it's doing is it's taking in the information around the pixels on either side and trying to blend it in, but it's not really working. We want more of the pixels and the texture and the colors from this side since there's brick behind the hair here. So in this case, none of the three options really work, and that's when we have to switch to our stamp tool, and we can do that with the letter S. Hold down our Alt or Option key, sample an area, and then we can cover that area up and remove the hair from that area. So that works a lot better versus the Healing Brush tool, and it's just a matter of switching back and forth between the different tools until you get the result you want. Not any one tool is going to magically fix 100% of your blemishes or whatever you're trying to retouch all the time. Some tools will work better than others in different situations. It's just a matter of knowing how each one of the tools work and their limitations, and then you know what other tools you can go to fix what you need to fix. All right, so I recommend grabbing this image from your resources folder and practicing what you've learned. Grab the Healing Brush tool and the Spot Healing Brush tool and practice removing blemishes on different layers, and then you can compare the different layers with each other. But as you saw, the Content Aware, Create Texture, and Proximity Match worked very similar in most cases. Some were slightly different, but go ahead and place them on separate layers so you can practice working non-destructively as well. And then in the next lesson, we're going to look at another healing tool, which is the patch tool. And this one is pretty cool. You're going to like this one. All right, so once you're done with your exercise and practicing, I'll see you in the next lesson.